Welcome to Hushed Voices. I'm your host, Roshni Suparna Divakar. Greetings. This is Hushed Voices, an exploration into lesser known stories from the Indian subcontinent. Every Wednesday, I'm going to bring to you stories from Indian folklore, oral history, and tales by voices that are otherwise marginalized. Let me tell you a little about the origin of Hushed Voices. I've been a qualitative researcher in the development sector over the past 5 years. Parallelly, I developed an interest in reading Indian folk tales. I realized through my work and my newfound hobby that information gets filtered and shared in one direction, out of urban spaces to the peripheries. As a result, voices from communities that have never been offered the mic continue to be unheard. This is changing slowly, with more emphasis being placed on documenting oral history and reviving lost cultures, but we are nowhere close to shifting the balance. Through Hushed Voices, I want to share with you stories that are not easily accessible to those of us who live in cities. I hope you enjoy them. To give you a sense of what is to come, I want to share with you a short folk tale titled The King of Mice. The story was written for children and is part of a larger collection curated by William Crook, the collector of Mirzapur in the late 19th and early 20th century. He, with the help of Pandit Ram Garib, collected a large number of stories from across the province. This story has been retold by W.H.D. Rouse. I have taken the liberty of editing parts of it as the story was written for a European audience and was not true to the Indian context. These are the only edits I have made, and the essence of the story remains. Without further ado, I give you The King of Mice. Far away in the forest was the kingdom of mice. There was a great city where every mouse had her or his own little house, with doors and windows, tables and chairs, books for grown-up mice, and toys for the children. There were little shops where the mice bought clothes and food and everything else that they wanted. There was also a little palace, and in this palace lived the Mouse King. One day, a caravan passed through the kingdom of mice, not that the men of the caravan knew what a wonderful kingdom they were in. They thought it was just like any other part of the forest, and if they did happen to pass the mouse palace, they thought them nothing but heaps of earth. This caravan encamped in part of the kingdom of mice to spend the night. One of the camels was very sick, and as the owner of the camel thought it was sure to die, he left it behind when the caravan went away. But the camel did not die. Very soon he got as well as he ever was, and when he got well, he also got hungry. So he strode all over the kingdom of mice, eating up the crops of the mice and treading on their houses, until at last he came to the Mouse King's park. He ate a great many trees in the Mouse King's park, and the keeper went in a hurry to tell the king. "O king," said he, "a mountain several kilometers high has walked into your park and is eating everything up." "We must make an example of this mountain," said the king, "or the whole earth may be moving next." The king called to his prime minister, who was a fox, and said, "Go fetch that mountain to me." So the prime minister went to seek the mountain that was eating the king's park. The next morning, back he came, leading the camel by his nose string. When the camel saw how little the king of mice seemed to be, he began to grunt and gurgle and sniffed with his funny little mouth. "Hello," said the camel. "Is this your king? I thought it was the lion who sent for me. I would never have come for a speck like this." Then he turned around, walked out of the court, and began eating everything he came across. The king was very angry, but what could he do? He had to swallow the insult and make the best of it. However, he was determined to watch for his chance of revenge, and soon he got it. For after a few days, the camel's nose string became entangled in a creeper, and he could not get away, do what he would. Then the prime minister came by and saw him in this plight. Imagine his joy to see his enemy at his mercy. Off he ran and brought back the king to see the camel. Then the king said, "O camel, you despised my words, and see the result." "O mighty king," said the camel, quite humble now, I confess my fault and pray that you forgive me. If only you will save me, I will be your faithful servant." The Mouse King was not spiteful by nature, and as soon as he heard the camel ask for his forgiveness, his heart grew soft. He climbed up the creeper and gnawed through the camel's nose string and set the camel free. The camel kept his word, and he became a servant to the Mouse King. He was so big and strong that he could carry loads that would have needed thousands of mice to carry. And by his help, the king made very strong walls and forts around his city so that he had no fear of enemies. So things went on for some time. But one day, some woodcutters came into the forest. These men lived all together in a village of their own, and they used to build houses of wood. When anybody wanted a house, they would tell the woodcutters, who would leave their village and go into the woods. Then they cut down the trees and sawed them into planks and shaped them into parts of a house. When the house was finished, they put numbers on all the parts and took it to pieces again and put it on a raft. The raft floated down the great river to the place where the house had been ordered. Then they put up the house in a very short time because it was already made and only had to be put together. These woodcutters then came and settled for a while near the border of the kingdom of mice, and in the course of their wanderings they found the stray camel. They promptly seized him and carried him off. When the Prime Minister, the fox, told the king what had happened, the Mouse King was very angry. He sent a detachment of his bodyguard to fetch the woodcutters into his presence. The bodyguard captured 2 of them and led them back. Then the king demanded his camel. "Pooh, silly little mouse," said the woodcutters. "If you want it, you must fetch it." "I will," said the king of mice. "Tell your chief, whoever he is, that I hereby declare war upon him." The woodcutters laughed and went away. Then the Mouse King gathered together all his subjects, lakhs and lakhs of sturdy mice, and they set out for the village of the woodcutters. The woodcutters had, by this time, finished their job and they had been paid a good sum of money for it. The money was carefully put away with all the other money they had in a treasury. Now, the mice were not able to meet big woodcutters in the field, but they had their own tactics. Night and day they burrowed under the earth. First, they made for the treasury, and though the treasury had stone walls, they got up easily through the floor, where no danger was suspected. One by one, they carried off every coin from the treasury. Then they got underneath all the houses of the village, and thousands and lakhs of mice were busy all day and all night in carrying out little baskets of earth from beneath the foundations. Thus, it happened that very soon the woodcutter's village was standing on a thin shell of earth, and underneath it was a great big hole. Now was the time to strike the blow. The layer of earth was so thin that the slightest shock would destroy it. So the Mouse King wrote a letter to the woodcutter chief, asking once more for his camel, and in the letter he hid a little packet of snuff. He put the letter in the post and waited. The next day, as the woodcutter chief was sitting in his house, the postman came to the door. Rat-tat-tat! The letter was brought to the woodcutter chief, and he opened it. He read it through and laughed. Then he waved it in the air and said, "Let them come." As he waved it in the air, all the snuff fell out of it upon his nose. The woodcutter gave a terrific sneeze. Choo! Choo! The thin shell of earth could not stand the shock. It trembled and crumbled and fell in, and all the woodcutters fell in too, until nothing was left of the village but a big hole. Then the Mouse King and his army went back to the kingdom of mice, and though they never got the camel back, for he was swallowed up along with the woodcutters, no one ever attacked the kingdom of mice again. That was The King of Mice. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you liked it, please subscribe to the channel. Hushed Voices is on YouTube, SoundCloud, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Details are in the description panel. Thank you for listening.